Today on the podcast, we have Nicole Dickson, founder of comedy and improv in Pensacola, Florida, director of the Improbable Cause Mystery Theater, and director of the Indie Arts Council.
Yes, president of the Indie Art Council.
President, thank you for coming today.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. I mean, we've been friends for a long time, and I was very happy when you asked me to come on the podcast. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to come in. I know we've had to kind of juggle schedules a little bit. I appreciate you coming in. I definitely want to have our audience hear a little bit about, the start of comedy here in Pensacola and then where that's coming. So I think that story all ties together from the start, you helping found and start Improbable Cause, the comedy troupe, all the way to what you're doing with the Indie Arts Council and the, Nerd Alert, there's going to be a comedy showcase, right?
There's going to be a comedy festival, a 3-day comedy festival.
So let's start at the beginning and let's get all the way up to that.
Get all the way up to there?
Because that is all tied together.
It is. It's crazy. It's been like a 13-year journey. It's a little insane. Improbable Cause started with a man named Eric Wartendijk, actually. And he was doing weekly workshops with improv comedy here in town. And I moved to town and I went to the workshop and I was impressed with the caliber of talent there. And I was like, oh, you guys are pretty good. You guys should perform. And Eric was like, oh, no, we don't perform. We just do community stuff. And not that I'm disparaging community stuff, but I like performing. And so I was like, okay, well, all right. And then I went away I let that go for a couple of weeks and kept coming into the workshop. And then about 3 weeks in, I was like, you guys should really perform. And Eric was like, you know what, Nicole, if you want to perform, with my blessing, go. Take whoever you want from the troupe, get some more people, go and perform. Because I don't really want to do that, but I can see you do. And I think it's something that can happen. And so with his blessing, I took the name Improbable Cause. And we started doing community workshops as well. We had about 30 to 40 people who would come to the community workshops. And then out of those workshops, we started hand selecting people for the troupe. And I brought a bunch of people in from UWF when I started there. Some of the originals, Riso, Jason, Tito, of course, Darren Campbell, who later went on to run the troupe with Debbie Dunkerley. Debbie came over from Fort Walton. Bill Whalen came in from an audition where he played an escaped reindeer from Santa's village in his audition for Party Quirks.
The Party Quirks,
yeah. So in Party Quirks, he played an escaped reindeer, and I will never forget this. He did a combat roll into the scene, and it was the most brilliant thing I'd ever seen. And I was like, "Oh, you're in. Whatever else you do today, I don't care."
Yeah.
And so that's how Bill got into the improv troupe, and now he runs it. Debbie's kind of taken a back seat a little bit. Bill's become the director, and so it's kind of crazy that we started 13, 14 years ago and we were in the Silver Screen Theater, and now they're at Pensacola Little Theater. They're having shows of 150 people per show. They've moved on to doing a cabaret night Wednesdays during the month, and now they're moved out to the Imogene. They just had their first show out there that I helped book, and they had 40 people at that show, or 30-something people, and it was a small space, so it was sold out pretty much. So it was good. So improv is definitely flourishing in town and has been for the last few years. And so every time I've come back into town, because I moved to Japan and then I came back and then I moved to Virginia. And so pretty much every time I've come back into town, I've sort of touchstoned back with Improbable Cause. And the last time I came into town in 2016, I came to Debbie and Bill and I said, hey, I want to start a murder mystery troupe, because I was part of a murder mystery troupe called Maverick in Virginia and loved it. It was the first time I'd performed murder mystery, and I really fell in love with the broadness of the characters and the interaction with the audience, and how it was a different show every night, and I was being paid, which was great. And so when I came into town, I was like, and actually I have to credit my husband Patrick for the idea, because when we were moving back, he's like, what are you going to do? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I might teach. I don't know. I don't have my master's degree yet. And he was like, why don't you start a murder mystery troupe? And I was like, I could do that. And so, yeah, so when I moved back in town in January, I said to Debbie and Bill, I want to start a murder mystery. And they were very supportive and and I said, I want to take the name Improbable Cause, but change it so I can bookmark off of your guys' success for the last some odd years so people kind of know the name. And they were like, oh, yeah, do it. And we did. So I started the Mystery Theater in 2016, I want to say. It's either 2016 or 2017. I think it's 16 because we're 3 years old now. At a Village Inn on 9th Avenue.
Which, is that even there anymore?
No, it doesn't even exist anymore. But they were the only restaurant that was like, yeah, come do your thing here. And we did. Our first show was in the back room of the Village Inn. Had 80 people in attendance, all crammed into that little breakfast area. An actor who was supposed to have been in the show that day called me that afternoon to drop out of the show. At which point I was like, oh, dear God, I have a show in 3 hours and I have no actor. So I ended up taking her part, but then I needed somebody to play the detective because you can kind of play the detective on a script and get away with it because they have their notebook or they have their clipboard or whatever. So I called Debbie in a panic and I was like, Debbie, I need the number of the understudy because it was somebody in the troupe, in the improv troupe. And I was like, I don't have it. And da-da-da. And so Debbie's like, what's going on? And I told her what was going on. And Debbie goes, oh, so you need somebody to like play your detective. And Debbie starts doing this character over the phone. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I need. Can I get this number from this girl? And I go to call the girl and I think to myself, why am I calling this chick? Debbie just did this part. So I called Debbie back and I said, Debbie, you don't have a choice. You're playing Detective Gunn. And Debbie was like, okay. When do I need to be there? And 2 hours later, Debbie showed up, did the entire show, was brilliant, of course, because she's Debbie. And yeah, that's how the Murder Mystery Theater started. And I love them. I have an amazing group of actors who are talented and dedicated and love what they do.
Where can people find the Murder Mystery now if they want to go see it? Not at the Village Inn, of course.
No, not at the Village Inn anymore. No, we're at Casks and Flights on Palafox, which is a great location. I mean, it's Palafox. We're there the third Sunday of every month. And we are at the Vineyard now on 12th Avenue. We just had our first show there last month, which was sold out at 80 people. And we're upstairs where the old Loblolly Theater used to be because they're renovating that whole space. So that's where we had it. And we're doing our show Lights, Camera, Murder there this month. If this airs in July, we're doing our show Lights, Camera, Murder there on the 27th. And we're really excited to do that. And then we're also at the Imogene Theater in Milton. So those are our three main venues right now. Sometimes we're at Scenic Hills Country Club. I'm hoping to expand out to Wind Creek Casino.
Oh wow, yeah.
That's the next big move. Yeah. And then maybe some casinos in Biloxi, but that's down the road. And then we're gonna expand out towards Fort Walton and Destin as well. So big things are starting to happen with the Murder Mystery Troupe because I've got like 21 actors now that I can call in and switch out, and I have a wonderful co-director, business manager, Clayton Habecker, who has come on as my graphic designer and my businessman and kind of the yin to my yang because, I'm going to yes and everything. That's what I do.
Right.
And we call Clayton Grumpy Cat because Clayton doesn't yes and anything, which is great though, because I kind of need that voice of reason to kind of be like, Nicole, are you sure you want to do this?
Yeah.
And he's fabulously talented. He's an excellent writer. He's a wonderful actor. He like I said, he keeps me sane. So yeah, I was blessed to have Clayton come on, and because he handles a lot of the stuff that I can't. Like I'm not a graphic designer, and I'm not a great business person, but he is. So
how are you finding so many of your cast? Are you doing open calls? Are you pulling from the improv troops?
Well, I originally pulled from the improv troops, and now. By and large, I just meet people and they've heard about the troupe and they want to audition, or I've lived here for so long on and off that I just know people. Michelle Green came and is part of the troupe now, and Marianne Del Gallego, SAG actress in town, she's in the troupe, and she's been in the troupe from pretty much the inception. Chris Holloway, Renee Luke Jordan, Shannon Williams, another fantastic film actor in town. Benjamin Vath, who was a young student at Pensacola State College, and he auditioned for my troupe. And I was pretty much one of the first things he was in, and he's grown tremendously as an actor in 3 years. And so it's been wonderful to pay actors, which is nice. And Improbable Cause was one of the first troupes to pay actors in town too, because I feel very strongly about that. I feel that talent should be paid. And if we want to foster talent in Pensacola, we have to pay them to be here, or else they're going to leave.
Right.
You don't want to go broke paying your talent, but you want to make sure that they get compensated.
Right.
So yeah, I love the murder mystery. I tell people all the time, because people think murder mystery and they think, oh, you're just a murder mystery actor, or, whatever. There's this connotation to it of big, broad, silly characters, but it's work. And I tell people all the time that to be a murder mystery actor, you have to be 3 things. You have to be an improvist, you have to be a host, and you have to be an actor. And if you cannot be all 3 of those things, you're not going to be a good murder mystery actor, because all 3 of those things are required in that show. So I'm very blessed to have people who can do all 3 things.
How do you choose your shows? Are they things you license out like most plays? Is any of it original material?
I write all my shows.
Oh, wow. So that's a whole nother skill set that you're bringing along with the directing and the hosting.
And now Clayton, half the reason I brought him on as a business partner is he writes the shows. Originally, I started the company with a guy named Mark Duggar down here, and Mark has since gone on to do sound design for Pensacola Little Theater, and now he works at Schmidt's Music, I think, and so he's gone in a different direction. But originally, Mark and I, when I lived in Virginia, were remotely writing a screenplay together called The Rapture, and we wrote a couple other things together. And so Mark and I really wrote really well together. And so when I first started the company, Mark was involved, and then we wrote our first show, The Comic-Con Killer, together. And it was a lot of fun. It was very zany because Mark's got that kind of personality. And then some creative differences occurred with that. And so then I went on to write a bunch of other shows. And then Clayton came on. And Clayton is really the only writer I've had so far that matches my voice. So you don't know who wrote one of our shows, whether it was me or Clayton, because he's so good at just kind of mimicking what is already there.
That's a really great talent
It
to
is.
have.
It's a great talent to have. And he's funny as hell. So he's a great writer, and all the things. So yeah, I'm really blessed with Clayton. And so he and I now write scripts, and I can go with him and I can say, Clayton, I've got this idea. Here are the characters. Here's the plot. Here's some of the evidence. Go write it. And Clayton will go and write it and not complain. And it's great because it frees up my time. So I don't have to spend 5 days or 3 days writing a show. I just need to come up with it in my head.
How does this spring forward into, you've always been involved, not in just the comedy and the plays and the entertainment of the city, but especially since you moved back this most recent time after your stint in Japan and Virginia, wasn't it, right? You've really become more involved with the involvement of the arts within our city itself in the jurisdictional. So you're part of the Indie Arts Council now, president of that. How did all of that bridge over and get involved?
So Indie Art Council started with Evil Dead the Musical, basically. So I moved back into town, and Improbable Cause had been doing its thing for a little while, and that was going great. And I met a guy named Chris Wilkes, who's the booking manager for Vinyl Music Hall. And Chris and I started talking. We started going to escape rooms together, and that's how we became friends. And actually, the real reason we became friends is Chris was interested in Improbable Cause in their workshops that they do. So he contacted me because he knew I was peripherally involved in that somehow. And he was like, how do I get involved in their workshops? And I said, oh, this, blah, blah, blah. So then we became friends, and like I said, started going to escape rooms. But he and I both love Evil Dead. Him much more so than I do, but I really love Bruce Campbell. So anyway, so we started talking about Evil Dead and stuff. And one day he writes to me online and he goes, so how does one get the rights for a show? And what would it be like to da-da-da? And he starts asking all these questions about performance rights. And I'm like, why are you asking this question? And he's like, and then my next message is, you're going to do Evil Dead the musical, aren't you? And he goes, I'll only do it if you do it with me. And so I was like, okay. And we started, and it was insane. We started at Vinyl Music Hall, which is not a theater.
No.
And it ended up being, and I choke every time I say this number, it ended up being a $34,000 production, which is insane.
Right.
Because I don't have $34,000. And we crowdsourced a lot of it. Sid Kuhn came on and was the producer, the executive producer, I guess you could call him, because he gave us a bunch of money. Yay, Sid. Sid Kuhn is the person responsible for making sure that show happened. Because if we didn't have his money, we wouldn't have been able to do it. So I'm forever indebted to Sid Kuhn. And then Julio Diaz came on the other side and got us a bunch of free money. Brought WEAR involved, and they did a 15-second commercial for us that aired 10 times. They did a news show on us. Like, literally, we were on the 6 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and 6 o'clock news, which they shot for us. They did PNJ and some other publications did a huge spread story on us. And there was a crap ton of media on Evil Dead the Musical that Julio brought in. Not to mention in-kind sponsorships from Cat Country, and Chizuko was amazing. Chizuko gave us all free food for our guests. So speaking of our guests, Chris is a visionary. And so he decided that he was going to bring the three ladies from the original Evil Dead into the show or to the production. And he did. We brought in the three ladies from the Evil Dead. They came to all the shows. And in the last show, one of the last shows, the Midnight Show, they were on stage with the actors. Wow. And we didn't tell them to do that. They wanted to do it. And they were so lovely and just wonderful people. And we're friends now on Facebook. And so it was a wonderful experience for the actors in the show to be on stage with the original three ladies from the Evil Dead. They did a talk back, which is part of how we got our Kickstarter sponsorships, because all the Kickstarter people got to come to the talk back and hear the story of how Evil Dead the movie was made. So we did that. And then, so after Evil Dead happened, Chris, Julio, Sid, myself, originally William Whalen, and then Dane McKendrick and Steve Wise and Chris Jadala all got together and wanted to put on a comedy festival, because we were like, well, we've got all this juice now, is what they called it. And we were like, we've got all this juice. We need to do something with it. And I have for a long time, and Debbie and Bill and the comedians in town, Emily Varley and Compton and Olivia Searcy and Andrew Ferrara and all those guys have wanted to put on a comedy festival for quite some time. And we just never had the juice. We never had the wherewithal to do so. And so when Chris Jadala came on and when Damon Kendrick came on, we all were like, okay, how are we going to do this? And we just did. We formed the Indie Art Council, which on LLC is in the Independent Arts Council of Pensacola. But with Dane's branding, it's now the Indie Art Council. It's got a beautiful logo. I love it. So we're doing that. And it's been interesting. It's very weird being president of a council. But I love it. And you know, I said this about Evil Dead a lot. I would not be able to do any of this without the people surrounding me. I always feel like, you know, I'm just merrily marching people into a volcano and they're just following me. And as Christine from Vivid Bridge said, you know, and then you built an island afterwards. And I'm hopeful that Indie Art Council will become an island to support arts in Pensacola, because independent arts needs to flourish. And, you know, you have PLT and you have UWF and you have PSC, and they're all the established organizations, and they're wonderful and they're supportive. But they can only do so much. They have their constraints. UWF has their academic constraints. PSC has their academic constraints. PLT has monetary constraints, and of course the constraints of the board and the community. So, you know, they want to help, and they help as much as they can. But there are also shows that they can't do, like Evil Dead the Musical. And in November, we're doing Hedwig and the Angry Inch at Vinyl. So these are shows that they want to do, but they can't. And so that's what the Indie Art Council's for. We're here to do shows that other people can or won't do, and to support other young artists in their shows. Because it's hard, and you know this. I mean, you've started from the ground up too. It's hard being an independent artist in Pensacola, especially when you don't have a lot of money or you don't have a lot of connections or you haven't been here for 13 years. And I've always been very passionate about mentoring younger artists, and not even younger artists, just not as connected artists, because I'm passionate about art and really enjoy the experience that can happen when art gets made. There was a show this summer. It was called Godfather Death, and this really is where Indie Art Council started. It was at PSC. I'm sorry, am I going too long?
No, you're perfect.
It was at PSC, and a girl named Austin Edwards put it on. And because of reasons, it almost didn't go up. And because of other reasons, it was able to go up. But that show almost didn't happen. And it was a beautiful show. People came in. I mean, we had dirt on the floor of PSC, like in a sort of metamorphosis kind of way where they have like the pool. We had like this dirt floor, and we bastardized the set from Hunchback of Notre Dame, which had just gone on. And Austin's one of the techies there under Bob Gandrup, who is a god. And Bob was so supportive of our endeavor, and Rodney Watley was so supportive. And so we kind of cobbled together the show, and Austin brought training of contact improv, which is from New York and New York and Atlanta and Chicago and LA and England. And none of us in Pensacola had seen contact improv before. We didn't know what the hell it was. And it's a great tool. And so we workshopped for 8 weeks, and then we did a show for 4 weeks, and that show almost didn't happen. And the powers that be didn't understand why we were upset. And I was like, well, first of all, it's 8 weeks of my time that now is being disregarded.
Right.
And this is a show that needs to happen because people need to see it, because nobody's seen anything like this in Pensacola yet. And thankfully they did. And it was a great show, and it was a little independent show with people who don't have a lot of money. And thankfully PSC was able to support that, even though they almost weren't. But that pissed me off. I'm gonna be honest. And when that happened, I was like, oh, I'm done. I am done, because this won't happen again. And that anger is what fueled me to get a bunch of people together who had previously followed me into the volcano to start the Indie Art Council.
That's awesome. And that's something that is going to, much like the improv group, much like the Mystery Theater, I think that's something that's going to pay dividends for the actors, the communities, and yourself for years to come.
We're hoping so. We really are. We have really big aspirations for the Indie Art Council, and not just producing shows. You know, everybody's like, well, what do you do? And we're like, well, we kind of produce shows, but we kind of produce other things, and we mentor artists, and it's hard because we're trying to become a 501c3, but we're not sure where we fit into that box, because we're not a typical 501c3. So we're like, we've got a really great guy named Jason, who's an entertainment lawyer and a tax lawyer, who's helping us figure that out now. And I do want to talk about Pensacon for a second, because they've been awesome to me. Steve Wise in particular.
Steve's a sweetheart.
I love Steve.
And a great writer.
He's on Indie Art Council.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I love
that doesn't
Steve.
surprise me.
The Murder Mystery has been at Pensacon for the last 2 or 3 years. I can't remember how many years. 3 years now. And that's a huge opportunity for like a little tiny murder mystery. And we sold out the courtroom at 40 people a show. And Steve gave us a chance, and people responded, and that was awesome. But if Steve and Pensacon hadn't given us a chance, then we wouldn't have known. And we got a lot of business out of Pensacon. Like those 140 people that came, a lot of them were local. And we're like, oh, where else do you do shows? And blah, 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 blah. And so that's what I love about Pensacola, is how supportive everyone is once you know people. And that's the problem, is you got to know people. And then when you know people, everybody's awesome. But for a young artist who comes into town, or even an artist that's been in town for a while but just doesn't have those connections, That's hard. And again, that's what Indie Art Council is for. Ultimately, is to pay artists who are already in town, to support up and coming artists who may not have those connections. And then the other thing Indie Art Council is for, and this is a big one, and it's part of also how it started, is we're trying to get not only people in the artistic world, but people in the business world as well too. Businesses like Casks and Flights on Palafox have been huge in supporting comedy in Pensacola with Stinger's Comedy Club. They support My Murder Mystery. They support live music. And that's one example of a business in town that supports art. Chizuko supports especially the indie music scene ridiculously. And again, supported us in Evil Dead the Musical with offering free catering and being wonderful to the ladies because they had some dietary restrictions.
And I've been to events there for the film community in town that they hosted.
Oh yeah, and they do
very,
Kitty
very
Get a
good.
Job stuff. And I mean, Chizuko's amazing. I love Daisy and Jessica. So when you get businesses like that who are willing to support you, that's huge. And what I want the Indie Art Council to do is to get more businesses like that. I know Jadala is talking to Quint Studer about some buildings, and there's that big bank building that's got rooms available. And when there are businesses or organizations or whatever that have room available and they're not supporting artists, to me that's almost criminal. I mean, I get it. I get that you've got to support your business too. But if you're able to support artists, then why not do it?
Right.
It just benefits everybody. And so, like Pensacola Mess Hall, where I work during the day, my boss, Megan, and I hope I can talk about this, lets us rehearse there at night.
Okay.
And I take Pensacola Mess Hall flyers and pass them out at my shows because our shows are family friendly. And so it's a reciprocal relationship. And I think one of the things that the Indie Art Council is going to do, especially as we grow and flourish, is continue to create those reciprocal relationships within the Pensacola community and really become a standard in the Pensacola community for independent arts.
I think it's wonderful. I think everything that you are doing and continuing to do is really beneficial for our community. I agree that Pensacola is a very sharing and uplifting place. And one of the things that I think is so important is this idea that you're creating with the Indie Arts Council that you started all the way back with when you helped start Improv because that you're paying artists, that you're finding funding for this, because I believe community art, community theater, community music, these things are generational. And what I mean by that is if it has always been something that was just a hobby for people, you could never make a living at it, you were never rewarded for it, there were low attendances, it was just not prized by a community, it's going to die.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's not seen. As a young person, you're either going to be passionate about it and leave and find a market, or, and therefore if you find success somewhere else, you would never bring it home, because there would be nothing to bring it back to. But with a place like Pensacola that has found people like you and other individuals that are putting a foothold in there and have put over a decade now, almost 2 decades, into building a framework and finding that support, and then the community rewarding that by showing up, by putting money. It's relationships and soft skills that have earned that payment all the way up. But that is going to make it possible for 10 years, 20 years. If Freya grows up and wants to do this, she could make a living at this because of what you and your contemporaries have started and done. And that's what I mean by it's generational. If you hadn't come along and it had continued like it was, there probably wouldn't be an option. I mean, the best thing we've had is, though, it's, we have PLT, but everything else is the funded university and colleges, which is lovely, but they're constrained, like you said, by budgets and academics. There's not a lot of roles out there unless you're a student. So what you're doing and, what your contemporaries are doing are creating that future. And I think that's awesome. And thank you for doing that.
No, I'm happy to do it. And it's, it's not just me, errant neighbory. is a new theater company in town and they are a 501c3, so good for them. And they're doing classical works and contemporary works and they're their own little independent theater company, which is awesome. Michelle, of course, has the Teen Shakespeare Troupe and now First City Shakespeare that she's doing, and really what the Indie Art Council came together to do is to tell people that these organizations, that these little theaters exist, and that we got to work together. Because one of the things that did piss me off about Pensacola for a really long time with the big three is their difficulty in working together as far as like schedules go and things like that. And now I think we're at a point where we all work together really well. And PLT and UWF and PSC have a synergy, which is beautiful. And I learned this synergy from Kathy Holsworth at PLT. After Evil Dead the musical was over, and I started talking to Kathy about some post-mortem stuff, because I certainly had my growing pains in directing and producing a huge musical in a place that wasn't a theater. So I went and talked to some of the mentors that have helped me throughout the years, and Kathy was one of them. And she said to me in a conversation, she goes, "You know what you are now, Nicole, right?" And I said, "No, I have no idea what you're saying." And she goes, "You're an artistic director now." And I was like, "Oh crap," because those are big shoes to fill. Yeah. I mean, that's a big job. And I was a little terrified when she said it. But again, yeah, I just started stuff, and what I mean by started stuff is I was the person who said, "Okay, let's do this." But if I didn't have people following me, I'd be screwed. And good people and talented people and organized people who are passionate about this as much as I am. And really, that's all I bring. I bring passion. Again, I'm just lucky that we exist as an organization. And while I appreciate you keep saying, you're doing this and you're doing that and you're doing that, it's not me. It's we. The Indie Art Council is a council. And we are a collaborative group of individuals that is bringing this to Pensacola. And I could not do this without every single person on that team. I'm going to frickin' cry. Because I am going to cry. Because they're all very passionate about what they do. And talented and creative and connected. And that's what you need to succeed in arts in Pensacola. You need talent, vision, intelligence, and connections. We're just very blessed that we have that team put together. And what I would like to say more than anything else is we need support. We're new. We went out for a FUFU grant. We didn't get it. It was going to be $40,000 towards Hedwig, the musical that we're starting in November. And we just applied for a Visit Pensacola grant to bring Kevin McDonald of Kids in the Hall to Pensacola for a workshop and a comedy show that's going to be August 14th. It's an all-day workshop. It'll last from 12 to 5 p.m. It's $125, which is freaking unheard of. And you get to perform on stage with Kevin McDonald that night in the show because you're creating a sketch with him.
That's cool. Where do people find more information about that?
You can go to Indie Art Council on Facebook to find information about that because we're taking the money. We have a PayPal. Like that's how low grade, like low tech we are right now. Like we don't have Ticketfly or anything like that. Like we're not doing it through vinyl. Even though vinyl is where everything's being put on. And we have to pay vinyl. Vinyl's not giving us the space for free. And so we just applied for a $5,000 grant, a little less than $5,000 grant from Visit Pensacola. And if we don't get that grant, that's going to be fun. It's going to be real interesting to pay for this thing. If people don't go to the workshop, it's going to be real interesting to pay for this thing that we want to bring to Pensacola to support Pensacola and train Pensacola. Artists and comedians and writers in Pensacola who want to go on and do other things. Kevin McDonald is going to be a great source for them, and we know this. And he's been awesome. He's like, I'll do it for X amount of dollars, which is way lower than he normally does. So yay, Kevin McDonald. And Chris Wilkes has been instrumental, and Julio Diaz have been instrumental in that communication with Kevin and getting him here and booking him and doing all the paperwork. And again, that's what I mean by it's not me. It's not me. I just got a bunch of people together. That's all I did.
Well, regardless, I think passion is the fuel. So you're still the fuel and the vehicle that's moving all this forward.
Well, thank you.
Let's at least give yourself the credit for that.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we're really excited about Kevin McDonald. And he is going to kick off, introduce, whatever, the 2020 Pensacola Comedy Festival. The first comedy festival in Pensacola, a 3-day-long comedy festival. It's going to have a headliner comedian that hopefully will perform at the Sanger. If they can't, they will perform at Vinyl probably. And of course, workshops throughout the day, and with writers, sketch artists, comedians, improv people, and then improv groups from Panama City, New Orleans, hopefully a troupe that I know in Virginia, of course, Improbable Cause, and then all the local comedians in town. Compton's going to come on with Stingers and bring some of his people. Hopefully we can get Ryan Niemiller, who is just on America's Got Talent, but a Pensacola native, to come on and just produce 3 days of comedy. And then one of the things that we're doing in association with that, and this is kind of where we kind of double dip a little bit, is Evil Dead the Musical is going to be one of the things that goes on. So we're remounting Evil Dead the Musical because people want to see it again. And a lot of people didn't get to see it or weren't in town or whatever because it was like during the holiday. So we're remounting that. And then that's going to kind of be cushioned inside this 3-day comedy festival because it's a comedy musical. So we're really excited about the comedy festival, and nothing like it has been done in Pensacola yet, not for comedy. And we're hoping it becomes an annual thing because it should be.
It's exciting
because comedy
times.
is huge here.
Yeah.
And Steve Wise and Chris Jadala both want to introduce film into the comedy festival as well and do a film festival in association with the comedy festival. So there's all kinds of room for growth, and there's all kinds of room for different organizations helping each other. And it's going to support Pensacola. All of Palafox is going to get involved because all the stuff is happening in Palafox. Chizuko and Cask and Flights and Old Hickory and World of Beer and the one that Joe Abston runs, Hopjacks, and all of these people, Graffiti Pizza, all of these people, businesses are going to benefit from this. We're really hoping to make it like a little tiny mini comedy version of Pensacon. Not to take anything away from Pensacon.
Pensacon has shown how much downtown, especially Palafox, will come out to support an event.
Yeah.
Oh, they are.
And how much it helps them
wild.
flourish too, because that, again, is what Indie Art Council is about helping businesses flourish and helping artists flourish. And connecting artists within each other. So we have a business plan and a marketing plan that Julio has come up with that is amazing. To really support the bed tax in Pensacola because people are going to come into town from out of town to come see this thing, and support businesses in downtown Pensacola. But we just need people to give us money. That's all we need. I need businessmen. So Quint Studer, I'm talking to you. Bear Levin, I'm talking to you. Because we can't do this on our own. And if we're going to support Pensacola, then Pensacola is going to have to support us. And that's really the bottom line. So the best bit of advice I would give somebody who really wants to do anything is to stop talking about it and do it. Because so many people, and not just here, everywhere, are like, oh, I want to do this, or I want to do that, or someday I'll be able to. May I swear?
Sure.
fuck someday. Like, no, you cannot wait because you don't need to be established, or you don't need to have all these widgets filled before you do something. Like I said, I started Improbable Cause Mystery Theater in a village inn. I mean, if I had said no, I can't do that. It's a village inn or whatever, we would have never gotten started. Or if I had quit that first show when that actor didn't show up, we would have never gone on to do what we're doing now. Evil Dead the Musical, and I've said this in a production meeting for Evil Dead the Musical or a post-mortem meeting. I've never directed a musical before I directed Evil Dead the Musical. I directed a tiny little one that was like an indie production in Gainesville. I directed shows, many different shows, but never a musical. And when Chris Wilkes asked me, I'll only do Evil Dead the Musical if you do it with me. If I'd have said no because I was scared, we would have never done it. Chris might have done his own version, which we joke about. Mm-hmm. That would have been like an indie punk rock version, which would have been great, but it wouldn't have been what it was because I brought the whole theater side in, and Chris brought the whole punk side in, and so it was amazing for what it was. The expertise and the knowledge and the relationships that were formed out of that experience was incredible. But if I'd have said no, it wouldn't have happened. So don't be afraid.
Yeah.
I think is the best thing I could say.
Don't let fear hold you back.
Yeah.
And now if people want to get in contact with you either for about one of the many things we've talked about or for advice from you as an individual, where can they find you?
Okay. The easiest place to find me actually is to contact ICM Theater on Facebook. Don't call us Improbable Cause because we won't answer. That's the improv troupe. But yeah, Improbable Cause Mystery Theater is ICM Theater. And if you message me on there, I'll respond. You can also look at my actress page, Nicole Dickson, actress, if you want to. Because, I do my own stuff and was in the Atlantic Rim movie that was on MST3K. Ooh.
I kind of just made it better, though.
It did. Really dear God, didn't it? That's a terrible movie, and MST3K saved it. Yay!
And that, by the way, I'd like to say that it being a terrible movie had nothing to do with Nicole. I mean...
Thank you. But I mean, it's supposed to be a terrible movie. That's the genre.
Yeah, exactly.
If Asylum did not do a cheesy, bad horror movie, then they wouldn't be Asylum.
Right. And it would have, sadly, Atlantic Rim got overshadowed when you guys came out around the same time Sharknado came out.
Oh, and it's so funny.
And they made both.
Oh, yeah. And it was so funny because like when Atlantic Rim came out and all like the press and publicity came out for it, like we were supposed to be like the big deal because we were the little bastard version of Pacific Rim. And so everybody was like, oh, this is like Vogue magazine and this other people did like a story on us or whatever. And we got all the press. And then Sharknado came out and was so Sharknado-y, blew us out of the water. Gone. And so I was thrilled when it came back up on MST3K because I was like, yay! And I got called Dr. Laura Dern, which, I'm not going to say no to. So that was pretty awesome.
Have you added that to the IMDb?
You mean Atlantic Rim or being called Dr. Laura Dern?
No, being on Mystery Science Theater.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, technically, I guess you have, so...
Yes, exactly. But I didn't add it back on.
No,
I didn't put... That doesn't say that, but Atlantic Rim is on the IMDb. Cool. Yeah, and so that's the other thing that Indie Art Council is going to do is support young filmmakers in town as well, which I know you're passionate about. So Indie Art Council is a way you can get a hold of me. We're on Facebook as well. And let me just chastise you a bit. So he kept saying Indie Arts Council.
Yeah, I mispronounced it.
No, and that's fine. Because it was the Independent Arts Council. That's how we started, and that's how you knew it. We rebranded, and we're called the Indie Art Council now. And the reason we're called the Indie Art Council is, first of all, independent is a bit too stuffy for us, and we want to go with indie. because that's really what we represent. We represent grassroots, and we represent new and emerging artists and shows that are esoteric and non-conventional. So indie fits that. And then art is because for so long, people really everywhere, you think of performing arts. And that's, we pigeonhole performing arts into performing arts. But art is inclusive. Art is visual art. Art is dance. Art is music. Art is performing arts. And so we want to re-educate the public, for lack of a better term, on what art is. It's not this, removed idea of, oh, I'm looking at art. It's art. And so that's why we're called the Indie Art Council.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Nicole.
I really appreciate you having me, Travis. Thank you.